Hey friends, welcome to my talk. I'll be talking about decoupling 101. Today we're just going to be discussing what decoupling is, why software development teams might decide to decouple, when not to decouple, progressive decoupling, and just a little bit of success stories in decoupling based on my experience working where I work. So who am I? Let's just go to the next slide. Who am I? So I am Shedrack Akintayo. I am based in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm a developer relations engineer at Platform SH, which is like a cloud hosting platform. I'm also a technical writer. I do my bit of technical writing with platforms like Smashing Magazine, Log Rocket, Container Journal, opensource.com. Basically, I do a lot of writing, which is like kind of a passion for me. And I like to call myself a community builder because I love building communities. I love working with people in communities. I currently work, let's say, volunteer basically with a couple of friends to build Open Source Community Africa, which is like the largest open source community in Africa generally. So let's just go quickly into the talk. The table of contents. So we are going to be exploring decoupling as a subject matter. I'm going to take you on a journey on what is decoupling. We'll break down the basics of decoupling, deploying decoupled. So how do we deploy decoupled apps? I would be using Platform SH as an example because I work there, and that's basically what I have experience using decoupled apps on. Why decouple? Why would any engineering team want to decouple your application? When not to, which is like really the most important part of this talk. Progressive decoupling. So I know a lot of us must have heard what decoupling and progressive decoupling is. Not necessarily know about it, just hear it in one or two discussions on social media. So I would also be talking about that. Then some success stories of like various organizations that have decoupled their applications and what it's like for them at the moment. So next stop is, let's go through the basics of decoupling. Let's talk about decoupling itself. So just onto the next slide. Monolithic Drupal. So I mean, a lot of us might have heard what Drupal is. I'm using Drupal basically because it's very the closest thing to the closest reason why a lot of people use decoupling. I want to have a Drupal backend and a JavaScript frontend. I mean, we can use Drupal for both our frontend and backend, but over time, teams decide to, okay, I need a frontend that I can swap out whenever necessary, whenever I need to swap out, Gatsby today, maybe after like 3 years, I need to do Next.js. So Drupal is usually the major use case, basically, when it comes to decoupling. So monolithic Drupal is what most of us are used to, while content management and, content presentation, you use Drupal for that. But decoupling now comes in, which basically separates presentation responsibility to JS app powered by an accessible Drupal API for content. So decoupling, basically, the simplest example is you have a JavaScript frontend. Yeah, you have a JavaScript which could be Gatsby, which is my preferred front-end framework generally, or it could be basically any JavaScript framework on the front end, React, Vue. Then on the back end could be PHP, could be Go, depending on how you really want it. So on the back end, Drupal, PHP. Now this particular architecture is called the decoupled architecture because the front end is being handled on a separate server, the back end is being handled on a separate server, and they are like transmitting data via an accessible Drupal API, usually REST API or GraphQL. Now, one other thing that was a very important part of decoupling is the abstraction. So if the API is abstract enough, if the API is totally separate from, depending on the backend and the front end, that's the API connecting both the backend and the front end. If it's abstract enough, the front ends can be switched out however and whenever these development teams want it to switch. So if I have a Gatsby site today and a Drupal backend, and I feel like, okay, Gatsby is becoming too much of a problem to install plugins all the time. I need something that is more native, something that I can manipulate as easy as possible. Okay, I want the React frontend. I would work on the plugins myself. I want to have total control over my frontend architecture. with a decoupled architecture, you can easily switch your front end that used to be Gatsby to Vue.js or React or however you want it, just consuming the API that's already there. It's as easy as that. Then it is also the important part of decoupling. One other important part of decoupling is how it affects development teams. Yeah, so it basically reduces the responsibilities for each team, and it also creates dedicated teams. So every single team has a portion of where they can work on the application. So it's easier to manage teams, and also recruitment becomes even easier because there are a lot of JavaScript developers in the world today, and I would say it's easier to recruit JavaScript developers than any other type of developers. I stand corrected though, but it's easier that way. So you can quickly hire teams, you can quickly expand teams, you can quickly collaborate across teams, because the front-end team works separately, the back-end team works separately. All we just have to do is consume a particular API. You understand? So this is one of the most important parts of decoupling. It's one of the importance of decoupling generally. And also heads. It's easy to hire people, right, when you have a decoupled architecture, because you can easily hire front-end folks, you can easily hire back-end folks. You do not need to depend on one particular type of person to what type of people to work on your application. It's easier that way. There's basically concerns are being separated, so you can hire on different parts of your team. So when you split your application into a decoupled architecture, it comes with like so many benefits, and I would be going into those benefits so much later in the talks. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, like I explained, so you can have various people working on your application. So let's say on the front end, let's say you need a search bar to be worked on. You can easily say, okay, you on the front end, go and fix whatever problem it is that's going on the search bar, and it does not affect the work of the backend developers. So nobody is depending on anybody to work, right? It's easier to make updates, to switch out changes with a decoupled architecture. So now let me just give a quick scenario on how to deploy a decoupled application with like basically platform message as a case study generally. Now, so to deploy a decoupled application, right? Ideally, each of the applications, so the front end is a different app from the back end, right? Those are like two different apps. The front end is maybe a Gatsby, a Node.js app, a React app, however it is, and the back end could be anything, could be PHP, could be Go. So you have these two decoupled applications. So to deploy them, ideally, they have to be separate from each other on various servers. So it could be deploying the front end on whatever server you want. You could be coming the back end on whatever server. Then there are platforms that allow multi-app projects, which means you can deploy a front end and a back end on the same server. Now, this just increases the importance and increases the relevance of deploying the decoupled app, because I do not have to think about managing two servers. I could easily just deploy two of my separate applications on separate containers on the same server, right? And basically, they communicate over a relationship, which is also an API, and it's easy as done. So, for example, Gatsby pull content from an API, and from an API that is being served by Drupal and displays it on the front end. That's exactly the idea, basically, that comes with deploying decoupled application. So Platform Message offers the multi-app cluster where you can easily deploy two separate applications on the same server. Then you can build the app, you can serve it however you want to serve it. So that's one of the most convenient way of deploying decoupled applications generally. Let's move on to the next slide. So basically, like I said, every single app has a folder of its own. It's a separate app from the other. So the front end can be worked on however you want to work on it. It does not affect the work that's going on the back end. That's the beauty of a decoupled architecture, because sometimes when working as with engineering teams, when working as a team, on a monolithic architecture, that's like, just the front end and back end being served on the same place and being worked on in the same language generally. whenever I want to work on a particular project, I would actually have to, there's a scenario where there can be a blocker because someone has to work on a particular part of that project that I'm depending on it to work before I can actually do my work. That's not how effective. That's not how effective software engineering team should be. Deploying decoupled, when you use a decoupled application, it's easier to get work faster. It's easier to deploy your applications faster. You can fix something on the front end and send it to production almost immediately, and without depending on the back end generally. So that's one of the beauty of deploying decoupled applications. So for example, this what I just displayed now is how you could easily deploy a decoupled application. If you look closely at the relationship part of this, you would see that if you look at the relationships, you would see that Drupal is just a very, very simple expression. So we have a Gatsby site that has a relationship with a Drupal backend. So you just express it as an expression in a YAML file, relationships Drupal, and then Gatsby begins to serve on the data on the front end through Drupal and through Gatsby. Sorry, so Drupal begins to serve data on the front end to the Gatsby site, so the users can see that. Then this is an example of how an example of how a decoupled site could look. So Gatsby plus Drupal. You can see that on the content backend, you can see the same content displayed on the front end. It's as easy as that. So the content managers, content writers can easily make changes to the content on the front end. Now, one of the beauty of the coupled architecture is that we also need to consider not just engineers, also considering content writers, like people that have to change some certain words on a site without having any really large technical understanding. So when you have a decoupled site, maybe with the whatever front end you use, front end framework, or whatever the front end architecture you use to design your front end, and a back end with a CMS, it's easier for content writers to, okay, I just need to change XYZ words. I just need to log into the CMS, change, and I see the data served directly on the front end. I don't need to have so many technical know-how. I just need to know how to operate the dashboard of the CMS, and I can easily change something on the front end. This makes work faster. This makes your content writing team even more effective. Now, let's talk about why decouple. So I've talked about, like, throughout the talk so far, I've talked about the basics of decoupling, why we need to decouple is also an interesting part. So we're going to talk about the advantages and the improvements that using a decoupled architecture can bring to your overall workflow. So let's just get into it. So the reason to decouple your apps, the pros is focus. Every single part of your team has a focus. So the front end can focus on completely just doing front end work. The back end team can also focus on just doing back end team. So every single part of your team has a focus. There's no interchange. There's no confusion. There's no blocker because one part of the team did not deliver their work on time. It's usually not like that. Then you can hire experts. So one thing about software engineering that I've seen over a couple of years is specialization. When you hire someone that has like specialized in a particular field, it's easier to get like a really, really good work than when you like hire for people that could just do any single thing. So hiring experts on the front end will make your front end even more more better, and hiring on the back end also makes your back end even better. So this way you can easily hire experts on the front end. You can also hire experts on the back end, and you are not dependent on one person to do the work of both front end and back end. That's one of the things that the more important part of decoupling applications would bring to your entire workflow. Then interchangeable front ends. If you've spent a long time in the front end ecosystem, you would know that over the years there has been various front end frameworks, front end libraries that have come out, from React to Vue to Svelte to Remix to Next. So each of these frameworks have their advantage depending on what a software engineering team is looking for, depending on what a product or a company is looking for. So with a decoupled architecture, if after if you've been using your legacy product is built to React, and over the years you see that Next.js is basically, which is a React library, is basically makes work easier for you. Shifting from React to Next.js become even easier because you know that you just need to change a particular aspect of your application. You don't need to depend on the backend anymore to be able to change. So all you just need to do is switch the refactor your code on the front end, then to consume the API from the backend, and you are good to go. So it's really easier that way. And also there's a common API between both front end and backend. So onboarding teams become even easier because I just know that, okay, you just need to understand how this particular API works and you'd be able to do your work effectively. So, like I said, expert teams with dedicated responsibility. So with an abstract enough API, teams can focus on one part rather than the whole site. Node.js experts can focus on the front end. WordPress experts or whatever type of experts can focus on the back end, depending on how your application is structured, the corporate application is structured, which is a really, really good, advantage. Then better recruiting around other languages. So far more talented Node.js developers are out there than you'd see PHP. A lot of people are doing like into Node.js, the whole front end ecosystem. So it's easier to hire on the front end than on the back end, in my experience. So this is totally on my experience. I could be wrong, but it's just in my experience. Now, use tools best for the job. So this is basically with respect to interchangeable front end. So Gatsby React are far better and more flexible at solving front end problems. Don't rely on plugins. Very, very important. Then interchangeable front ends, like I said, again, requires an abstract API. Very, very important. I know why I'm being very particular on abstract API, because if your API is not abstract enough, it gets difficult, right? This is one of the disadvantages of the decoupled applications. This is actually one. I will go into it when I get to that particular section of the talk. Now, you can easily switch out the front end to the newest and the best framework you need, depending on your situation at that time. So many heads. So same backend consumed by multiple front ends with different purposes. So you could use, so if you need to split your product, if you need to split your application from, let's say, you need the marketing side, you need the dashboard, you need whatever part of your application splitted out, all of them could actually, the front ends could actually consume just a particular backend. And that way you spend less. That way you hire more people. That way you can kill two birds with one stone, basically. So let's go to the next part of the talk, which is explaining what many heads across teams means. So headless, so when you can hire across different teams, you can use across different teams and keep all the content in sync. That's a very, very big advantages, which increases the work rate of your team, and it creates collaboration, a sense of collaboration across every single team, because the contents are in sync, one site for each team, collaboration is back 100%. Basically, that's what I mean by many heads across teams. So now the next thing is, maybe I shouldn't decouple, right? I mean, a lot of people are asking themselves, the conversation we've been having now is why I should decouple. So whatever I'm in a situation, how do I recognize a situation where I should not decouple? So it depends on the following I'm going to mention, and also depends on your CMS, which is your content management system. So let's get into it. So reasons to not decouple, the cons. The amount of work required to get an abstract API is so much. So this could be a disadvantage if you are trying to build fast, if you are trying to scale your team at a very, very fast rate, because the amount of work that we go into creating a strong API that is consumed by anything is a lot. So it would be very, very dishonest for me to not talk about the disadvantages or the drawbacks of decoupling. So that is the reason why I'm actually talking about this particular section of the talk. Now, so for every single, now when you also decouple, you begin to worry about so many things. You have to write 2 times more tests that you should have written with a monolithic application. Then you need to also worry about security, because you are managing 2 different apps. So security on the front end is different from security on the back end, which is a lot of stress for teams that are small or for teams that want to move fast. So 2 apps, 2 teams, double the test, and the security oversight becomes a problem. Now, rewrite tools supported by monoliths. So if you initially had tools that only can be supported by a monolithic application, to switch to a decoupled application, you might need to rewrite those tools, which is like a lot of work. So that's another disadvantage of the coupled application. Now, team isolation. Now, front end, back end. The promise of decoupling and the decoupled architecture is that the front end and the back end teams don't need to worry about the back end of front end engineering, right? The reality is work is necessary to keep coordination and visibility, especially when hosted in two places. So all of the another disadvantage is that the accountability becomes a problem because both teams don't really need each other to work, and that does not like really encourage the collaboration culture. So you need to, as a team manager, as an engineering leader, you need to take extra time to monitor both the front end folks working on the front end and also folks working on the back end. This is actually one of the major drawback of the coupled architecture. This is one of the major problems why a lot of teams have not switched to the coupled architecture. Now, let's talk about progressive decoupling real quick. Now, progressive decoupling is mainly in the Drupal ecosystem that I've seen this work. So most of my success stories and case studies going forward will be specifically on Drupal and JavaScript. Now, progressive decoupling. So progressive decoupling generally is a bit different from full decoupling because the major benefit is you get all the benefits of decoupling while avoiding some of the downsides. So in progressive decoupling, generally, a JavaScript framework is layered on top of a pre-existing Drupal front end, which could be Vue or React. So a JavaScript framework is layered on top of a pre-existing Drupal frontend. So a pre-existing Drupal frontend already exists, could be, however, a monolith, an existing monolith before. Then taking a JavaScript frontend that is totally separate from that monolith and putting it on top of that particular monolith makes the whole concept of progressive decoupling. Now, the best way to progressively decouple a website is to use widgets because of the flexibility they provide. So for example, I could build a search bar widget that I need to go on a existing Drupal frontend and just take it there and fix it there. That's one of the beauty of progressive decoupling, because you only decouple when you need it, right? You only decouple your application when you need it. Hence the word progressive decoupling. It as it comes. I need a search bar, but I do not want to use the native search bar on whatever CMS I'm using. Okay, I could just quickly write a search bar widget and just fix it on my existing Drupal frontend. Now, by widgets, I mean widgets are standalone application by nature. They adhere to the decoupled principle. So by nature, widgets are one of the easiest way to decouple your application generally. Now, it's also one of the good side of progressive decoupling is it also appeals to both developers and content editors, because they can easily do their work without having to worry about any technical know-how. This is for content editors. Then for developers, they can make updates, they can do changes without really needing to tell content editors that, okay, this place needs a little bit of change. Then developers get to leverage whatever JavaScript framework of their choice without having to mess with the content editor's workflow. So I can build a search bar in React and it doesn't affect the workflow of whatever work that the content editors need to do on the front end of the application, which is one of the most important part of progressive decoupling. Now, the drawbacks of progressive decoupling, let's talk about that. Now, progressive decoupling doesn't leverage server-side rendering via Node.js. So one of the major problem rather of the progressive decoupling is that server-side rendering in Node.js is not leveraged easily. So to do that, it takes a lot of work compared to when you do full decoupling. So you find it difficult to get the benefits of server-side rendering. Of course, it takes a higher cost because you are leveraging an entirely different framework on whatever you have existing. Then, of course, one other part is JavaScript Ascension is not going to stop anytime soon. Therefore, the risk of sacrificing some of Drupal's popular capabilities might still seem insignificant compared to the JS advantage at the front end level. In essence, in summary, generally, is that the risks you get basically from using Drupal, right, might still specifically so the risks you get basically from using full decoupling rather, it's very, very insignificant when you have to use various JavaScript advantages on the front end level. So I wouldn't say it's a good idea to progressive decouple, right? Even though it has its importance, right? But the cost that comes with progressive decoupling, it's really, really higher than when you have to do full decoupling. That's just the summary of that particular statement. Now, decoupling success stories. Now, these success stories basically is some of the customers basically I've worked with personally that have decoupled and how they were able to, serve their decoupled applications and what benefit they were able to get. So IFFR plus Bust. So pre-pandemic, this particular website, a film festival run on a single Drupal 7 site. The challenge basically was that moving the entire festival online during COVID basically was stressful because they already used to moving, doing offline shows. They are really used to doing in-person events. So now they needed to take their festival online, maybe building an entire event platform generally. So they also need to improve the site readability and the festival credibility. So now we decided to use the decoupled architecture. They delivered 100% online festival, which opened for further microservice enhancement towards a general streaming platform. So with the decoupled architecture, they were able to take their film festival entirely online through the general streaming platform they were able to build. So they were using their existing Drupal sites, which is where most of their data is stored. Then they just put a better UI basically, and it was easier to just make that move. Then they were able to create a flexible virtual platform that sets the stage for new and exciting digital experiences for future festivals. So this is one of the major use cases that I have seen the decoupled architecture work successfully. Then next up is open social decoupling in progress for a SaaS. So basically they built a fully decoupled SaaS product, which is basically a Drupal installation profile they sell to individual users so they can get their own community sites. They decouple because they decided to decouple because it allows independent development. It also open them up more to more integrations and external channels. So with this, choosing a decouple site basically give them the flexibility of independent development. You also give them the benefit of being able to integrate some other integrations and external data channels. Then decoupling basically, according to what their experience with it, has provided a open social, a platform that is faster, leaner, and more flexible and easier to continuously update and improve their product. So you can read the case study whenever I share my slides with the organizers of this event. So you can easily read the case studies, the main case, and understand exactly how we helped improve their whole process. And this is like the end of my talk. I hope that you've been, convinced on whether you should decouple, when you need to be decoupled, and what progressive decoupling is. So thank you so much for joining my talk today, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the event. My name is Shedrack Akintayo. I'm a developer relations engineer at Platform SH.